Welcome to episode number 24 of the Marine Layer podcast with TJ Mathewson and Lyle Goldstein. On today's pod, we're joined by Marc Luino, an MLB content creator on YouTube. Really fun conversation with him. We have our three Mariners storylines of the last 7 days. We have our minor league check-in segment. We have our another umpire of the week, our MLB Wraparound. And as always, to close out the show, we have Speak Your Mind. Let's get it rolling. And we welcome you into this edition of the Marine Layer podcast on Tuesday, April 11th. Lyle, I did not miss watching stressful extra inning games. I'll say that much, man. I'm already done with it. I'm already done watching ghost runners on second base again.
The Mariners play a lot of extra inning games, and it's easy to forget over the course of an offseason, and especially now that they're playing them this early and the two high-pressure games they've lost. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster of emotions this week, not just for the Mariners, but I'd say for fans too, when you sit through those games and you don't come away with a win.
We're recording this here on Tuesday. The last two full games we have seen have both been extra inning games. We'll touch a little bit on the game in Cleveland on Sunday in one of our segments. It relates directly to it. But yeah, 12 innings. The reason you put those runners on second base so these games can end after 10. So if you have to go 3 of those innings where you have to stress about a runner on second base, it's not fun. It really is not fun at all. Let's get to our 3 Mariners storylines of the week. Okay, up first, our first storyline of the week, Lyle, the process finally looks different for Jarred Kelenic. We talked about it all spring. But we watch him up there at the plate. Again, notice the word I said there, process. The process for what Jarred Kelenic is looking for and computing for up there at the plate looks different than it did in seasons past.
The biggest thing is he's not chasing pitches. I mean, I don't want to say he looks like a completely new player, but that's almost how you have to phrase it. Because the old Jarred Kelenic, some of these breaking balls that he's seen early in the year, he's swinging at those because he's seen a lot of breaking balls low and out of the zone. He used to chase those and come up empty. Now, all of a sudden, he's laying off those. He's nearly in the 70th percentile in all of baseball in chase rate, meaning he's well above league average in not chasing pitches and swinging at the right balls in the zone, which is awesome because it's translated to a really, really good first couple of weeks for him.
What did you think waking up and looking at his Baseball Savant page today?
Oh, it's awesome to see a bunch of bright red on his page in terms of X slug and hard hit rate. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Some other things that stand out here, I mean, in terms of average exit velocity, he's hitting the ball hard. His quality of contact, which is measured by expected weighted on-base average. Again, weighted on-base average differentiates a home run from a single and a walk, etc. And the expected one is what you expect to based on your quality of contact. So that's how that's measured. His expected batting average, his expected slugging is way up there. All the peripherals for what Jarred Kelenic is doing well is still there. Now, there's still a slight caveat in a small sample size, like all of these small sample size numbers. He's still striking out a bit. He's still swinging and missing a little bit. But you think over the course of the season, most of these numbers will stabilize. While some of the other ones might come down a little bit, we would expect the strikeout rate, Lyle, as well to come up.
It shouldn't stay at above 30% for most of the year. Now, to set some expectations, strikeouts may very well always be a part of Jarred Kelenic's game. There's a lot of players who have that in their game. Doesn't mean they can't be good players. Look at Eugenio Suarez. He struck out over 30% of the time last year. He had a great year. For Kelenic, if he can be around, I'll call it 25 to 27% in terms of his strikeout rate, but it's all from swinging at the right pitches, which he's been doing so far, then that's okay because that's going to come with a lot more quality of contact and a lot of hard hit baseballs, which we've seen early on in the year. So if he's just limiting some of those strikeouts, the Mariners and just about everybody, including Kelenic, will live with a 25, 26% strikeout rate.
I want to highlight a couple at bats that really showcase it, and both of them came from Sunday's game in Cleveland. While both you and I watched this at bat with him against Emmanuel Clase, I mean, he is fighting off. Clase is, first of all, a top 5 reliever in all of baseball. So that's just the start. And he throws a cutter that ranges from 96 to 102 miles an hour, gutting in on his hands. So what does he do? I mean, he doesn't, he manages to spoil all of the cutters in the strike zone. I'm taking a look at it. He threw 4 separate cutters on the inner quadrant of the plate that Jarred could have swung and missed at, or he could have rolled over easily. But no, he spoiled those pitches. But then Clase threw him in an 8-pitch at-bat, the 7th and 8 pitches of the at-bat while the count was 2-2. He threw him 2 sliders down and in on his back foot, and Jarred did not swing at either of them, which is so impressive because it has the same shape as a cut fastball, but it has a little bit more depth to it. And Jarred still did not swing at that pitch, which might, out of the hand, at first look like a cutter on the inner half of the plate that he should swing at, when instead it drops out of the strike zone towards his back foot. There in the 9th inning, both the 7th and 8th pitch of that at bat, both sliders missed, and he ended up walking in that 9th inning. The other one, Lyle, came in extra innings against O'Neil de los Santos, the one where he mashed a double there in extra innings. He worked the count to 3-2. Fouled out. So I did try and sequence these at bats and sort of wrote them out a little bit. He did fall behind earlier in this at bat. He swung and missed at a changeup and watched a fastball. So he gets another changeup on pitch number 3. He spoils it back, works the count all the way full on 3-2. He has a really good take on the 6th pitch of that bat, which just missed off the inside corner, one of his better takes he's had this year, not chasing that pitch in on his wrists and breaking his bat. He fouls off a pretty good pitch of pitch number 7 of the at-bat, which I thought he should have crushed. He did not. And then pitch number 8 of the at-bat, he nuked out to right center field, was this close to hitting a home run. So then he turns it around, and the next day smacks a game-tying home run in the 9th inning against the Cubs and Michael Fulmer on a similar pitch. The process of everything I just described for Jarred Kelenic, we love it. It is so nice to see that this is the kind of hitter we thought we were getting when Jarred Kelenic was coming up. It's a small sample size, but we do like where he's at here in terms of working counts and picking the right pitches to hit.
I'd love to hear what he was doing in the offseason, because his ability to read pitch shape and read spins, night and day from 2022 to 2023. To go and do what he did against Emmanuel Clase, who you called him a top 5 reliever. You can argue he's the best reliever in baseball. To spit on those sliders with 2 strikes, beyond impressive. I mean, he's swinging at those last year. The old Jarred Kelenic probably whiffs at one of those pitches. It's night and day what he's done. It really is. And we talked about it time after time. If he's going to be this X factor, the Mariners' ceiling all of a sudden gets that much higher. Now, the bottom of the lineup's going to have to hit. That's a whole other topic. But he's doing everything they could ask of him right now. You know what? I'm going to go out and make this statement. There is no chance Jarred Kelenic repeats what he did the last 2 years. I'm saying that bold and brash. Will he be an all-star? I can't guarantee that. I don't know what his 2023 is going to hold as a whole. He will not repeat what he did in his first 2 years in the big leagues. Not with this process.
Okay, everyone listening, clip that. Clip it. Hold it over his head. I know a couple of people who might do that, but I'm honestly in the boat with you there. The process looks too good. And again, this isn't even guaranteeing that he's going to be a good player. It just means he's not going to be what he was the last 2 seasons.
And the Mariners could really use it. Again, even if he's a 105 WRC plus guy, so he's 5% above league average, it's still night and day what they got from 2021 and 2022, especially if he's going to end up playing that quality defense that everybody knows he can play in the corners as well. Okay, let's get to our second storyline here. So a little bit on the downside here, TJ. The bullpen, as we know, has had its issues this week. They have blown a couple of games between Sunday in Cleveland, last Wednesday against the Angels. That game wasn't blown, but the lead was extended by LA. And then on Monday against the Cubs in extra innings, they let the lead go again. Or they let the tie go. So it's been a shaky ride the last week for this Mariners bullpen, which is a little concerning.
I come down when I'm trying to think of the right word to use for this, I mean, it's execution, right? That's what it is. And not just throwing pitches over the zone. I mean, you can think to Sunday where Penn Murphy in extra innings chucks a ball into center field, trying to pick off the runner behind him and ends up just throwing it away right into center field. To throw, again, in Arizona, they work on 50 to 100 times. And then as soon as it matters in a game, he just throws it into center field just inexcusably on a mistake that you cannot be making once the regular season starts. But it happens anyway. And I kind of want to focus on Matt Brash a little bit, because he's the guy they really need to rely on now to be that true, just filthy shutdown guy with Munoz out. I mean, he is the guy, right, in that bullpen with that sweeping slider that has gotten all of this hype. But when they needed him in the 9th inning on Sunday, his slider flattened out. He lost all command and he lost all feel for where the ball was going, to the point where he's just spinning slider after slider that gets flatter and flatter, and the break is shorter and shorter, to the point where he left one, middle to Will Brennan and cracks it for a game-tying double that, probably should have been caught, but the execution from Matt Brash and the bullpen throughout extra innings was also terrible, right? Like, this team and the lineup is not built. They're still kind of built to win close games, theoretically, right? For what they want to execute like they have the last 2 years in these close games and do everything right. But your bullpen's not executing like that. You can't do that. So it's just kind of disappointing to see here through the first week and a half.
You called Brash's struggles. I think your quote was, that is straight out of the Chris Langan interview that we did, isn't it? Because exactly what Chris talked about a few weeks ago with us, that's what happened.
It did. And the thing I was curious enough, right? So when we talk about an elite Matt Brash slider, the thing moves like 12 to 15 inches, that like elite. Do you know how much his sliders were breaking to Will Brennan in that at bat?
It looked like almost nothing.
Yeah, it was between 7 inches and 3 inches, which brings Matt Brash's best pitch of all time back into the mundane circles. And that makes him not as good, right? Your pitches don't break and they don't move like they should. It doesn't work. And that's all part of Brash. This is his first time with Munoz out. It's like you're tabbing him, hey, you are the high leverage guy. And it just all falls apart for him, it was really disappointing, because you think of a guy like that to come in and shut down the game. That's the kind of stuff he had. And that's like, he started the inning by making Jose Ramirez look silly again. And then it all falls apart, which is, again, disappointing for Matt Brash. You just expect more of it. And Brash isn't the only one who's struggling with execution. We can name a couple of guys here who have really struggled. But, Brash probably most importantly, because he's the guy you rely on the most.
If anybody needs a breather with Matt Brash, let me just read you this, because his ERA and his WHIP have not been good so far. His ERA is 4.76 at time of recording. His WHIP is 1.76. His xERA, 2.04. FIP, 0.75. xFIP, 2.15. So his underlying numbers say, you know what? This is probably not going to last. He's going to revert to being the Matt Brash of 2022, and he is going to find his rhythm. It's just not happening yet, and it's unfortunate, because these 2 extra inning games this week, the Mariners could have really used to get themselves on track. But Matt Brash himself should not be too off the rails for most of this year.
Right. But you watched both those games. Like, there was no underlying numbers there to suggest he was successful in those outings. We watched him attempt to execute pitches and put pitches in good spots, and he was not doing that. Just flat out.
No, not at all. And again, I'm not defending his outings from the last couple of days. I just mean that long term, this is probably going to get cleaned up. Yeah, it's unfortunate that he couldn't get those outs when he needed them. I just don't think this is going to linger all year. But they're going to need Matt Brash, because while we're on the subject of the bullpen, let's talk about Andres Munoz a little bit, because this week he hit the IL. Mariners' best reliever, diagnosed with what they called a deltoid strain. Remember, he didn't have a full spring to get work in, like a full load of work in. So he's been feeling a little sore between outings, and the Mariners noticed. So they put him on the IL. They seem to think it's precautionary. They seem to be doing it as a way to try and get Munoz some extra rest and get him locked and loaded for the rest of the year, because they're going to need him. And they were saying he just wasn't responding well to the point where he felt like he might need 2 to 3 days of rest in between all his outings. And they just couldn't give him that in the big leagues. So they thought maybe 2 weeks to give him rest could help him. But the other guys are going to need to step up while he's out.
Let's hope that's all it takes is the minimum amount of time on the IL. They cannot afford to have him out that much longer. From, again, what we've seen, like, this Mariners bullpen could still be good, right? It could be. They're coming off back-to-back years of being a top 5 bullpen in baseball. It is hard to sustain that. It's even harder to sustain it when your top 5 reliever of baseball is out, right? If they're going to win these close games, they need the best guys in the bullpen, and Andres Munoz currently is not in that bullpen.
Last thing before we move on, really quick. You're right. Sustaining an elite bullpen back-to-back years is incredibly hard. To sustain it 3 consecutive seasons is near impossible. So I'll ask you, what's a successful year for the Mariners bullpen? Top 10, top 12?
Probably top 10, I would say. Based on the guys you have in there and the stuff they throw, I would say top 10. Yeah. But are they a top 10 bullpen without Andres Munoz?
No shot.
Probably not. No. Right? Like, he brings the bell curve, drags the bell curve into the top 10 range easily, right? Because you look after that, right? The depth is not quite there, and the guys that are truly elite and truly difference makers in that bullpen, it just kind of limits it a little bit. One guy, Lyle, as we move on to our third storyline, who could be a big difference in this bullpen that we've been very pleased about so far this year, Trevor Gott. His fastball cutter combination has been a really welcome surprise in this bullpen. And the early returns are, I think Jerry knew what he was looking for. And as of now, Trevor Gott's stuff looks like it can play and keep up in a major league bullpen.
I think I texted that to you this week. When Gott had one of his really sharp outings, I think my exact words were, okay, I see exactly why Jerry DiPoto likes this guy. Was that about what I said?
I think it was pretty much that. What's so bizarre already, he's already getting whiffs on 38% of his fastballs. That's pretty good for the only pitches he is really getting whiffs on is cutter and his fastball, but the pitches have been remarkably effective. The profile of the pitch, you pick it out, and Jerry, opens up his spreadsheet of what they look for in a release point and a spin rate and a velocity and a movement, and he's like, boom, we got it. He's just sitting there waiting to be taken, and he got him. And he's been good. We obviously always love larger sample sizes of these kinds of things, but the stuff looks good.
And the cutter's already got a run value of -2 just through 6 appearances, which that's really good. And the fastball, I mean, you talk about the swings and misses. The movement on that fastball is absurd. I didn't realize that it moved the way it did before seeing him in big league action during the regular season.
And the quality of contact he's allowing too, Lyle, top 7% in baseball, which is what we want from relievers. That's what Paul Sewald does so well, is limits hard contact. And that's kind of the comp with him and Topa. A reason that Jerry acquired him is like, hey, look at that arm slot. We already have a guy like that in the bullpen who does pretty well. Why don't we try and mold these guys maybe a little bit after him, but with a little bit more velocity as well?
The Mariners had elite bullpens back-to-back years in 2021 and 2022. Here's the catch. It wasn't the same guys outside of Sewald. 2021, it was Casey Sadler, Drew Steckenrider, Paul Sewald. Sewald was another big factor in 22, but the two main Bulldogs in that bullpen were Andres Munoz and Matt Brash. You're going to need somebody to surprise you in 2023 if you want to continue to have a really good bullpen. Looks like it has a chance to beat Trevor Gott. Through just a few outings, he has looked razor sharp.
So there's a lot of optimism for that, Lyle, for what it is. And it might not just be Trevor Gott. There might be someone sitting in the minor leagues that is waiting to come up and really stamp a piece on this bullpen. And there could be a guy in this bullpen currently that was good last year that might not be. Remember, like Drew Steckenrider in 2021 was awesome. And then he comes back in 22 and he stunk. And it didn't take the Mariners really that long to move on because they knew what they were looking for in the bullpen. They found it, and the bullpen just kind of continued on without a skip, right? Without any sort of blip in the radar. So that's what I think they're thinking at this year. And, Gott could be that guy or one of those guys. It could probably be multiple as well.
Bullpens are fickle, and we're going to find out here pretty quickly in the next few weeks who's really got it in terms of sustainability and who may start to fall off. It'll be something to watch.
Was that a pun?
Fickle?
Who's really got it? Come on.
Oh,
Did
no,
you think
but
you could sneak that past?
Honestly, that was unintentional, but good catch on that. That's a good catch. Well,
I've got good ears, Right,
now ever
done.
using that word on this podcast is going to throw me for a loop because it's such a normal word to use in a sentence. But here is now on a Mariners podcast, I'm going to think about it now every time from here on out. Okay. We had a great interview this week with GiraffeNeckMarc. It was a really, really cool interview. Marc Luino, his full name. If you guys watch any baseball YouTube videos, you've probably seen him. He's wildly popular. He has over 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. He does a bunch of stuff on social media as well. And he's a Mets fan. He follows the Mariners. He follows all baseball teams, but he is at his core a Mets fan. It was pretty cool to have a conversation with him because we've talked to a lot of Mariners people so far. All the interviews have been great, but it was cool to, one, get an outsider's perspective, and two, branch out a little bit in this interview to not just talk about the Mariners, but cover some broader topics as well.
It's good to get like you said, a different outside perspective as well. And if you sit back and think about it, Lyle, like you said, we didn't talk about all the Mariners, correct? But there's a lot of there's the two franchises, despite being in different leagues over the last 5 or so years, have a lot of interlocked storylines that we're able to touch on early in the interview. That's actually, I thought was pretty entertaining. And it's also good just to get someone's perspective from a new media perspective, like a true, like, our age content creator whose full-time job is to create content and cover Major League Baseball on his platform, which is YouTube videos. He does a podcast for the Mets as well, directly for the Mets, by the way, which I think is pretty cool. That he's the host of Metsed Up. I believe it's on their website if you go look at it on their YouTube channel. Anyways, so it's really good to get like a perspective from somebody who is like he is the new digital media of covering baseball, and it's really good to get her perspective. We talked a little bit of WBC as well. He got to spend a lot of time down there in Miami watching a bunch of WBC baseball, something we talked a little bit about this on this podcast. And it's good to get his perspective on how that all rolled out. It was awesome.
And he does a bunch of really cool YouTube videos. I'll throw this as a little bit of a teaser. He did something for one of his YouTube videos that involved 3 separate Major League Baseball stadiums, and I'll leave it at that. It's one of his better videos, and we'll let you listen to what we talk about in the interview about it because it's a really, really cool thing that he did involving 3 Major League Baseball stadiums that, by the way, aren't all that close to each other. So, with that, let's get to our interview with GiraffeNeckMarc. All right, we welcome on Marc Luino. You guys probably know him better as GiraffeNeckMarc, popular baseball YouTuber. He's also the host of the Metsed Up podcast. Marc, we appreciate you taking some time to join us. We thought we'd just start with the hard-hitting stuff first. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you despise Paul Sewald?
Oh, that is a 10. That is a big, fat 10. Just the fact that he was so godforsakingly horrible with the Mets. And then he goes to Seattle and he figures it out. I hate him. And then he gets, last year when you guys came to Queens, gets a couple big outs, starts gesturing to the crowd. I mean, that guy gets under my skin. I never thought Paul Sewald would be that guy, but yeah, I hate him.
Do you reflect all Mets fans when you say it? Or are there Mets fans who are like, well, it is what it is? Or do you think that's a majority stance there?
I think a majority of Met fans probably hate him. Like I know my podcast co-host, James, he's a big pitching guy. So he like respects what Paul Sewald's been able to do. He's like, listen, he completely changed. He turned around his career with like one pitch. I blame it on the Mets. I don't blame it on him. I'm like, no, I blame it on him. Like I hate him. He didn't have the dog when he was here. Now all of a sudden he's this nasty pitcher. But all jokes aside, I mean, happy for him. But obviously, whenever the Mets play you guys, I really hope he blows it.
I forget the celebration he did when they were in Queens last year, but I did love the fact he broke out the rock and the, oh yeah, it was this, right? So
yeah.
Earlier this weekend in the Cleveland series, I mean, he broke out a new one. He looked at Josh Naylor and rocked the baby a little bit, which I really liked. I'm glad he's branching out a little bit.
Listen, I mean, if he's starting to talk some trash, I think that's a good thing as a Mariners fan. Like, Paul Sewald was a dude who on the Mets might have had like less than zero confidence. So the fact that now he's able to talk some trash, I think that's really good. I think you should be excited.
It's funny. I think that confidence just kind of grew for him over time as he started to pitch in a high relief role with the Mariners. Because when he was called up, funny story, it was the same day both Jarred Kelenic and Logan Gilbert were called up. And he fired off a tweet that day. He was like, the Mariners are calling up all their young, spry prospects today. And he's like 31, 32 years old. So he's probably thinking, oh, I'm just going to get a cup of coffee. And then, he turns into a high leverage guy in the bullpen. So yeah, I think it just kind of grew over time for him.
Yeah, he's just really, I mean, he has turned his career around completely. Like, he's become a very solid reliever at worst. Take away how much I dislike him, but you still got to respect that he gets big outs now.
Mariners fans, Mets fans, both off to, I would say, a sluggish start to the year. But if you go on and read both the Twitter verses of both those fan bases, would it be safe to say season's over? Both sides?
Yeah. I mean, from the Mets fan side, I can speak on a little bit more. It's definitely a little dark, a little overreactive, I think, to say the least. Like, yeah, 5-5 isn't the start that we wanted, but also, like, we came out to such a hot start last year and we ended the year so poorly. Like, what does it really matter? As long as you get to the playoffs, I think that gets lost, like, in the shuffle a lot, especially with, like, a relatively new format. Last year we had more teams, and just the way that baseball is normally played, you think like, oh, the best team, you got to be the best team all year long. But like, in all honesty, you just got to make the playoffs and then hope you get hot like the Phillies did. Because we know they weren't one of the better teams, but they got hot at the right time. I mean, even like a little bit to the Mariners' credit last year too. Like, they got hot towards the end. They had that like good little run and like it eventually cooled off. But yeah, I think both sides probably maybe take a little gas off the pedal of the overreaction just because like it's so early. They're both very good teams. I don't think either of these teams should be missing the playoffs.
How much time do you have to carve out to watch teams besides Mets? Like your channel, your YouTube channel, GiraffeNeckMarc on YouTube, you try and cover everybody. I mean, you're talking about all 30 teams in baseball. How much time are you able to carve out for teams besides the Mets to, really focus on and really pay attention to? Like the Mariners, 3 time zones away. They're playing at 10 o'clock when you're probably trying to churn out a video for the next day and thinking of other things, or maybe smartly sleeping. Where how do we where does that time go? Like where does it come from? Where do you have time to like look into all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the fact that like this is my full-time job, so like relatively speaking, not that I have to make time for it, right? So like when the Mets are on, I'm all focused on the Mets. Like that's pretty much it. So like actually a team like the Mariners, like I keep a lot of tabs on the Padres too. Like even before they knocked us out of the playoffs, I was like very much like a de facto like Padre fan. So I like it works out where West Coast games start just as the Mets game ends. So I have the ability to actually watch both of those. I have a harder time honestly watching like central team games. Like if there's ever like a blank in my knowledge, or if you're like seeing a quiz, like the teams I normally miss, I don't miss the coasts. I always miss the central because those are the games I just don't get to watch because they overlap with the Mets. But yeah, with the Mariners and stuff, I mean, for those of you who didn't know, before we started this podcast, supposed to start like an hour earlier, and I fell asleep because my schedule has been all over the place. So yeah, like my sleeping is very sporadic, especially because I try and make sure that I watch like those West Coast games, and ends up making me go to bed pretty late most nights.
So from a Mets perspective now, if we want to tie this to the Mariners, because this is a question that happens, especially with, Jarred Kelenic's season right now. He's getting his essentially third stint in the big leagues to prove himself. And now we have a high-profile Mets person on the podcast here with us. So if we turn the dial back to 2018 and we look at it from both sides, we're going to put you on the Mets side of the Jarred Kelenic, Edwin Diaz trade again. Are you doing that trade?
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. Which is crazy because I think I had that take when it happened. I think I liked the trade when it happened, but I was worried about Kelenic. Like, I was a huge fan of his. I mean, I still am. I thought he was going to be like I don't want to say generational type talent. I didn't have him there, but I thought he was going to be like a Christian Yelich-esque type player where like going to be really good. There's going to be some like super, super high years maybe. I don't know about MVP, but like all-star caliber outfielder for his career. So that part was scary to me. I also thought Robinson Cano was probably going to be a little more effective than he had been for the Mets, and the steroids obviously kind of changed things. But looking back on it now, I mean, Edwin Diaz, outside of that 2019 and a little bit of 2020 year, has been that same closer he was in Seattle for that brief period of time that he was there. He's absolutely money. Like, yeah, the injury sucks now, but going back, that's one of the few things that I can say Brodie Van Wagenen did right, was actually go and make that move. Kelenic just hasn't performed. It's like a weird thing of he's probably still too talented. Like, the trade probably still doesn't make any sense. But with the results that we've now seen, makes it a lot easier to be on the Mets side.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people on the Mariners side probably would still do that trade too, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like Kelenic still has 4 years of control left, right? That
100%.
like that's the reason you say yes. Like it's a slam dunk yes on both sides still, even though over the course of the last 3 years the trade has been, thrown in a blender of how it's viewed and all the takes going from every side.
Yeah, the way that it works is like the Mets got rid of a guy obviously with massive upside. I mean, you guys know like Kelenic has that potential. Maybe it's staggered a little bit or come back down to earth, but the massive potential upside there was for sure worth it for a closer that you guys probably weren't going to retain for that long. Like, I mean, we saw the contract he got. Mariners tend to not give those contracts out, especially relievers don't really get those contracts from the Mariners. And then like a Robinson Cano, you got to get that money off the books too, which was huge. So it feels like a no-brainer from both sides. It may have not worked out maybe as well for the Mariners, especially because like some of the other pieces in that trade really didn't do much. But you had the opportunity to maybe get that outfielder that could have been like the, all-star of the future in the corner for you guys. And he still could be. I'm just maybe not as guaranteed now.
I will say, I mean, this is just something to keep an eye on out in New York and out on the East Coast for your sake. I'm not saying he's going to come out and light the world on fire this year, but his approach looks like significantly better all of a sudden. Like, he's not swinging and missing at all these change-ups down and away or breaking balls out of the zone. Like, he looks much more refined in these first 10 games or so, and he had the good spring. So that's a positive sign. But I will say, it's funny how far the pendulum swung on takes with this trade between both fan bases. Because for a while when it happened and Kelenic asserted himself into being a top 5 prospect and Diaz was struggling in 2019, all these Mariner fans were like, oh my God, I can't believe we got away with this trade. We fleeced this trade. Then all of a sudden, the last couple of years, all the Mets fans are like, thank God we got rid of Kelenic. Edwin Diaz is the best reliever in baseball. Like, we don't need him. For us, like, it gets lost sometimes, right? Like, trades are supposed to help both sides. It's not supposed to be a fleecing. So from our side, we're just like, can it be the Francisco Lindor, Jimenez, Rosario trade where like Jimenez and Rosario are both great players, but you guys got exactly what you wanted out of Lindor? Like, that's what we're hoping for.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was actually going to bring up, like, in a perfect world, you would want every trade to be like the Lindor trade where both sides get what they want and both sides get players that are going to help them. And like, that's, I think, the thing that also gets frustrating, like in fandom, just in general, or maybe like from the perspective of me, who just like covers a lot of baseball, is like people always want like someone got fleeced. Like, no, it can work out sometimes for both teams. It's not that one team doesn't have to get fleeced, the other team didn't get, ripped off, whatever it is. And like you said, Kelenic, there have been improvements. It may not show in the numbers yet, but he does look different right now, at least.
I think the funniest part of that trade, maybe the most memorable part, if both sides come out of it and say, yes, like, we got what we wanted out of this trade, is how the trade started, where it's essentially Jerry Dipoto walking up to Brodie and offering up Robinson Cano and say, hey, you want a future Hall of Fame second baseman? And Brodie's like, huh? That's awesome. And he turns out to be, he turns out to last he didn't even last 2 years on the Mets.
I think he technically had 3 years because of the, suspended year or whatnot.
Right.
Yeah, his tenure was really short. I think this is the last year he's on the books for the Mets. I'm pretty sure we just give him his $20 million and then we never have to talk about Robinson Cano again. Honestly, hadn't really thought about him until coming up on this podcast this year.
I mean, I will say when you have like a top 5 to 7 second baseman in the game, and that actually might be underselling it in McNeil, like why would you, right? Which is kind of another thing I was hoping to ask you about is, so in the Mariners world, what a lot of people like to complain about, whether it be warranted or not, is they don't feel like ownership spends, and they feel like they should be spending a lot more on their ball club than they do. How unreal is it to have Steve Cohen as your owner? Like, this is just like nothing we've ever seen before in baseball. And I think Mariners fans envy Mets fans a lot in that way.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, all I've ever really wanted as a Mets fan, and this is like, I hate saying this out loud, but it's also true, is like, I want to be the Yankees. I want to be the Yankees. I want to win. I want to spend money. I want to be obnoxious. I want to be intolerable. I want to brag about how much we win. Like, that's all I want. When you are the best, you get to do that. So the fact that Steve Cohen's come in and we haven't won anything yet, but he's going out and getting Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Hall of Fame players. He's going out and giving Francisco Lindor $300 million. Like, it's like you get a contract and you get a contract and you get a contract. The dude pays me to do a podcast. Like, he's spending money on everything. So it's pretty unbelievable. Like, I would highly recommend it to anybody. If you can have your owner spend a lot of money for your team, I would say, yeah, you should do it. It's a great feeling.
If we're going to talk about spending money, we want to circle back to the Mariners here eventually, but this needs to be asked. What about the guy who didn't end up getting signed? He agrees to a contract at about 2:30 Eastern sometime during December. Carlos Correa agrees to this enormous deal with the Mets. I'm literally about to fall asleep here on the West Coast when they agree to the deal. And it never ends up happening. So how does it feel to be like you are the second wheel essentially? Like we go first, like you're a second wheel, a third wheel. No, okay, so you were maybe the third wheel, and then he goes back to his original his original ex.
That was like a unreal timeline, especially because like I had made a Carlos Correa Giants video, and the Mets like came in late. Like if you remember too, like they came in late as like, oh, maybe it's the Mets, and then the Giants got him like, hey, congrats, like this is a great deal. I come home because I was out in Texas, I was away. I come home, I go to sleep, like I wake up the next day to phone calls of people. My dad's like, you haven't tweeted anything this morning. What's going on? Have you not seen? I'm like, seen what? What are you talking about? He's like, Carlos Correa signed with the Mets, like John Heyman saying it. I couldn't believe it. And then like a little fun inside scoop, like when we on the podcast, we like recorded an episode for Correa. We just couldn't put it out till anything was official. That never ended up happening. So there was like an entire episode recorded about our reactions to Carlos Correa. That's like just completely exists like in the netherworld of like, we'll never see the light of day. So my podcast host kind of said the best when we recorded that fake episode was, it still doesn't feel real to me. And until it's like officially announced, it won't feel real. And we now know it's not. It never felt like we were like necessarily like the second team. It was just like, oh, okay, you know what? He ended up coming to the right team. He made the right decision. And then the medicals came back and they were like, can't take this guy right now. This wouldn't be smart for the long term, which also sucks because I'm a fan of Carlos Correa. Like I wanted him on the team.
We'll just never see an offseason like that ever again, where a player, again, has stops at 3 separate teams. He signs contracts reportedly with 3 separate teams, only to have 2 fall through. Like we're never going to see a saga like that again.
No, I honestly can't even compare it. The only thing that feels comparable, but it's not, was when like DeAndre Jordan in the NBA, like remember when they like kept him hostage from the other team? Like, you're not leaving until you sign this contract. Like that was pretty crazy, but that wasn't even close to this.
No, not at all. Which is, again, like I feel for you as a Met fan. I mean, I know they're already spending a lot of money. Yeah, I was going to say to begin with, but I know if that had been us going through the ringer that way, I would have just been crushed to be a part of that saga. So I get it. Believe me.
Yeah. Carlos Correa would have looked good at shortstop for the Mariners.
Hey, we said
the thing is that subject has come up like multiple times over the offseason. We've gotten to talk to I think we did talk to Ryan Divish about this. Who covers the Mariners for the Seattle Times, about like he agreed, like once it got down to 6 years with the Twins, I'm like, how are the other 28 teams in baseball not jumping on this when a premier shortstop gets down to 6 years? Because Jerry DiPoto's thing is not signing guys to 10-year contracts into their 40s. Well, if you sign a 28-year-old to a 6-year contract, those check marks don't hit. So you think like you don't lose anything. But they must have just hated his medicals, I'm going to guess. They probably they probably got enough bad juju from that.
Yeah, a couple teams pass on a guy, and they're like, maybe there's something wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just maybe, just maybe.
You know, getting into your channel a little bit, Mark, and now tying this back to the Mariners a little bit, a guy you like to talk about, and basically most of the baseball world likes to talk about a lot these days, is Julio Rodriguez. I know you're a big fan of him. You've followed him since he was in the minors. It's kind of crazy to us being Mariners fans and growing up in an age where we lived through 21 years without a postseason appearance and not a whole lot of stars that came through, where now there's this young 22-year-old universal star that not just Mariner fans love, but baseball fans seem to love, and you seem to really be a fan of him. I mean, what makes him, from a more national perspective, so easy to like and root for?
I think he just got kind of like that it factor. I got to meet him when he was 18 years old at spring training. I think that was like 2019. I think he'd be 18, maybe. I don't know how the timeline works necessarily, but got to meet him, talk to him. And that was like when he was just kind of starting to get some attention as like a prospect. And I was like, this dude's going to be something. Like, and I was like, I want to talk to him. And they're like, sure. And he wants to talk to you. Like, he wants to practice his English. Like, he was like preparing himself. And the conversation we had was incredible. I remember being like, wow, you speak like really good English. He's like, oh yeah, from like a young age, my parents like sent me to school and they're like, you're speaking English. Stop speaking Spanish at school. Speak English at school. Like, that's what we want. It's almost like they knew, like, you're going to be a star. I think he's just like, he's really cool. He seems to really understand like what his role is and what he's trying to do. He has fun on the field and he's really, really good, which helps a lot with all that other stuff on top of it. Like, we're in a really good spot just in baseball in general, where a lot of like the great young stars are also like great off the field or like really care about like building their brand off the field. And I think J-Rod's one of those guys too, where he's not just like playing the game and like, all right, you'll see me tomorrow. Like, he's like on social media. He has a YouTube channel. He's partnering up with companies. Like, he's really marketable. And I think that's something that's going to, I think, attract a lot of people to be a fan of his as well.
So you've gotten to talk to some prospects then. So like, where does that stack up for a guy who's that young? That you said it's more common now, but like on a scale, is that what, like 20% meaning more common? Is that, 30% of the guys could handle that when they're 18?
He was the youngest player. I think I talked to him when he was 18. I think I talked to Francisco Alvarez when he was 18. And Ronnie Mauricio when they were 18. I haven't really talked to many like 18-year-olds just because, like, weirdly with COVID and my schedule, it just hasn't worked. But those guys have all kind of been different. Like, Julio was extremely well-spoken, extremely confident. Only one who did know English as well. Like, not that that's a slight on any of the other guys, but he was like very, very much like, I'm going to know English. Don't help me in this interview. I'm going to figure it out myself. Francisco Alvarez had like all the confidence in the world, like even more than Julio Rodriguez, but didn't know English and like was a little hesitant necessarily to say some things. And Ryan Mauricio was really shy, but Julio was like, I have strong answers. I know what I'm going to say. I'm doing it in English, which is like very big for, building your brand. Of course, the English speaking players tend to get a lot more contracts, money, and brand deals. It just seems like he was a little more ready to be like a star. Like it's like he knew.
Based off that, then, what other guys really stood out to you when you've gotten to talk to them? Because you get to go to, try and cover all of these guys. So you get to broaden your lens a little bit more than we do. Who has really stood out?
I would say like I've probably had, in terms of like my best interviews, it's a lot of them happen with the Mets. I got to talk to Scherzer and Verlander, which was pretty unbelievable. Like, Scherzer thinks about the game of baseball differently than most guys I've ever spoken to. He's just like, his brain works different. This was last year before the pitch clock was introduced, and he already had his plan for what he was going to do. He's like, I'm going to weaponize this. To hear Max Scherzer say he's going to weaponize anything, let alone it be something that's supposed to be a disadvantage for him, was pretty crazy. And it seemed like he could talk with us for another hour. He just had the game to start. And then Justin Verlander, you have like incredibly focused, like very polished, very refined, but like not bad answers, like still a great interview. Like, those two to me will probably go up there as like some of my favorites, especially because we're talking about Hall of Fame pitchers as well.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's got to be unbelievable to be able to talk to two guys like that. And especially with the way you were talking about how Scherzer started to figure out how to use the pitch clock in advance. And obviously he's a super intense guy, but the fact he gave you a super cool interview. I mean, that's got to be awesome for you, but also for your listeners and people listening. I mean, it's got to be such a little foot in the door to get to hear that stuff, right?
Literally never like the way that it happened was so like last minute. We just like went up to him, hey, can we get an interview? He's like, sure, give me like 5 minutes, I gotta do my running, which we thought was like, no, like I'll not today. And then all of a sudden he like comes over, he's like, okay, let's do it. We're like, oh my god, okay, like let's scramble. And I think the funniest thing that happened was before the cameras even started rolling, he was like, all right, let's do this. We're like, great. And he introduced himself. He's like, hey, Max. I'm like, well, we know who you are. Like, you don't have to introduce yourself. I'm Mark. You don't know me. I know you.
Exactly. Which is just so awesome. Getting into your channel a little bit here too, because you talked about this is your full-time job now. I mean, making videos, creating content, watching these games. So first off, I guess I'm just curious, how long did it take for it to become a full-time job? Because I know you've been at it for a while now.
Yeah, so I went full-time in 2019, right after I graduated. Just ended up that my channel started doing really well right as I was graduating college. So that worked out perfectly. But I have been making just YouTube videos in general since like 2012, 2013. Started off in the FIFA community of all places, which is very strange and not like baseball at all. But I was making baseball videos probably since like 2015. I think it was like MLB The Show 14, 15 range was when I really started making videos. But I had never really taken it seriously. Like I always wanted to do well, but I had classes, I had friends, I was doing other things. That 2019 year was like, I'm going to go for this. I don't want to get a real job. I want to do this. Let's see how well I can do it. And luckily enough, it took off. And, this is my 5th season now of being full-time doing baseball content solely, which is pretty awesome. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.
What's the biggest thing or let's say the biggest marker for success then when you're attempting to create content and find new ways to engage people?
Not to be like lame, but it really does depend on the person. Like some people don't care about like making money, right? Like they're like, I want people to watch my content. I want to be heard, or I want to build a Twitter following. Like I want people to care about what I say. For me, it was really like, I figured out like success. The number that I was always chasing was 100,000 subscribers. You get the plaque, which was really cool to me. That was something I had always wanted, was a 100K subscriber plaque. And when I knew that I reached that point and like the way that I did it, I was like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now, which means I can do this now. Like this can be my job. So I wouldn't say like I was chasing the money. I was more chasing like that milestone, knowing that everything else would come along with it and I'd be able to continue to do it.
Did you go to school thinking you were going to be a traditional media sense? For example, Lyle and I both went to ASU. We both we went to school wanting to be broadcasters. I would say we still decently do. We do a podcast, so that's probably half the work right there of doing that. But when you went to school, was this like an idea, hey, I might want to go cover sports? Not like, even though I make YouTube videos, hey, I want to go be a writer. Hey, maybe I'm going to go be a broadcaster somewhere, something like that.
No, I wouldn't say it was. I originally, like when I went to college, I was doing like my own like business for a while. That was doing really well. So that was like something that I was doing. But I was originally a business major. My grades were god awful. I wasn't going to class. I wasn't doing anything. I was preoccupied with some other stuff with my business that I was running. And I got kicked out of the business school. So here I am as like 21-year-old. I have no major. I'm like, I don't know what classes to take. I just wasted like an entire year. What am I going to go into? I went into the advertising major, which was in like the journalism school of all places, which is bizarre. And I was like, all right, I'm going to make like advertising. Like I like Photoshop. I like the idea of like advertising is a little bit of a game. You're chasing impressions and stuff like that. I thought that was cool. And I was like interviewing for jobs like before I graduated. Like I was interviewing in Charlotte and interviewing with companies in Atlanta because I went to the University of South Carolina. And I was like very much like, okay, I got to figure out what I'm doing. Then the channel took off. I'm like, this is great. Like it kind of all came from a spot of like the baseball channel started because I wasn't playing baseball and I desperately needed some outlet because I still was crazy obsessed with it. But none of my friends were like me with baseball. Like they like their teams, but they're not watching every single game. They're not talking about every other team. Like this was my way to kind of find like a community of people, which was originally how it kind of started. And then I was like, oh, okay, like we got something here. Let's try and make this a real thing. Like I said, kind of my 2019 last year of college.
So how long did it take you to learn all the video editing? Because it doesn't sound like that's really what you focused on in college in terms of your major with anything sports media related. It sounds like you probably learned a lot of that on your own. So how much practice and consistency did that take?
Yeah. If I look at my first videos that I was making, they were pretty horrible. And I think anybody who does YouTube would agree. Like, you look back at your old stuff, you're like, wow, I can't believe I put this on the internet. This is terrible. But it's something that like you just kind of get better with as you go, and you learn your little tricks. You learn like your shortcuts that make things faster, or a certain way that your editing style works. I don't really know a time of when I felt like I became good at editing, because I think I always thought I was. But it was one of those things where I was like, I need to learn how to do this in order to make YouTube videos. So I kind of just threw myself into the fire, and I was like, I'll watch a YouTube tutorial if there's a question on something I don't know how to do. Like, I knew the basics, and the basics carried me far enough until I needed to learn something new.
How big of a part do you think this content creation game is in the future of how baseball and sports are covered? Because this is very different from how sports have been covered the last 20 years, right? It's traditional written and broadcast stuff. But this is a kind of last, YouTube's decently old, but I would say in the last 7-8 years there's been significantly more of this. So like, where do you see, like, how big of a chunk is this opposed to what has always been?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least in baseball, it's still relatively small. I mean, you can look at like the top creators, let's say, in the baseball world, and there's a lot of guys who make baseball videos, but there's like a clear separation in like the sub count, which is like kind of lame to say, because like everyone still gets great views, and that's all that really matters. So I think like it's still a very much a growing community. It's like almost like in like the baby steps still. So I love that I feel like I'm in early at least. But I think like the future is, this is what people are going to want. Like, I'm sure we all grew up watching SportsCenter, right? And I'm sure we can probably count on our two hands how many times we've watched SportsCenter in the last year. Like, it's not good content, especially if you're a baseball fan. They don't talk about baseball at all. So it's almost like you're getting like that Netflix, Hulu-ish feel of, I want to watch this, I can go to this guy's channel and find this, where that doesn't really exist in sports. So I think that's kind of like the future of, when I want to watch Mets content, or if I want to watch baseball content, I can just go search it up on YouTube or whatever platform it's going to be, and I'll be able to find it.
It's funny you say that about how sports content has grown, and your example about watching SportsCenter, because you're right. Like, I don't watch SportsCenter anymore. I grew up with it. In fact, those morning shows specifically, like the example I always think of is, if you told the guys on First Take, we need you to break down Corbin Burns' start last night for the Brewers. Yeah. Like, would they look at their producers like, did you just speak another language?
They would be like, I mean, we've even seen like when they talk about Shohei Ohtani, who's like a mega superstar, they have, or Mike Trout, like they still have like the worst takes in the world ever. Like Chris Russo was talking about how like Mike Trout stinks. This is the best player in baseball. He struck out. It's like, dude, like I know you're probably doing this to get a rise out of everybody and for clicks, but this is why no baseball fans watch this stuff, because nobody wants to hear stupid takes like that.
Right.
It's just so funny, because like they have the baseball guy and still mess it up still, and it's so funny. Well, speaking of Mark, what that subject you talked about of what they talked about on First Tape, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the WBC. We've talked about it a little bit during the off season on this podcast, because there's only so much Mariners content to fill. The WBC was really awesome, and you got to spend some time there, so you could give us a firsthand account of really just how that environment was and how much the people really, really care about the sport outside of the United States. It really is. It's a spectacular event, isn't it?
Oh, it makes you feel like we don't actually care about the sport at all. Like watching like every other country's fan bases compared to ours, I'm like, oh, we got a lot of catching up to do. Like, it does not mean the same to us as it does to them. Like, we almost take it for granted, I think, in a way. Like, Team USA fans, I'm one of them, because, Italy and Greece don't really have great teams. But they're definitely like lacking a little bit. Like all the Latin fans are unbelievable. I think I tweeted out, I'm like, best fans in the world. Like the Latin American fans are unbelievable. Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico. That's what I got to see. All of them brought the heat. Like Mexico fans. Like I wasn't sure what Mexico's crowd would be like, because like realistically, like soccer is their sport. They were like super loud and super excited about like Mexican baseball, which is awesome. The Japanese fans were amazing. And what was really cool too, that I loved about the World Baseball Classic and like all the fans, I feel like you go to like sporting events in America normally and you see some fights, right? Like a drunk fan says something about your favorite team and someone takes a swing, then a fight breaks out. this is a little anecdotal, but I didn't see a single fight in the 2 weeks that I went to all the World Baseball Classic games. Like, every single fan base was unbelievably friendly. You were rooting for another team. They didn't care. Like, I had a friend who was rooting for Venezuela. He was Venezuelan. After every game, after Venezuela would beat the teams, he'd go up to someone like, hey, can I take a picture with you? And they're like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm meeting a Venezuelan fan. You're taking a picture with a Dominican. It made baseball feel like a really, really large but tight community, which I think is something that we miss out on sometimes with like the way that Major League Baseball works.
Okay, I'm actually really glad you say that, because I feel like there's a lot of Mets fans out there that after the Edwin Diaz injury, they were like, cancel this entire tournament. Where it sounds like you, like, I'm not saying you should be happy about that injury, but it seems like you have a pretty cool perspective of like, this event is awesome.
It's so much bigger. Like, it's such a cliche, but like, it's bigger than baseball. Like, these players care so much. Like, Edwin Diaz, I'm sure is going to play in the next one too. Like, even with this freak injury that happened, because like, this means so much. This is, to a lot of them, like, more important than the World Series is like playing for your country, winning the World Baseball Classic. Out in Japan, like for Samurai Japan, this is the most important thing. Like, everything that you do in your baseball career is to hopefully one day play for Samurai Japan and win the World Baseball Classic or win an Olympic gold medal. So seeing that pride that they have for that, like, it really does bring a different feel to the game. And the Edwin Diaz injury was such a freak accident. Like, that would have happened on the mound in spring training. Like, to me, to blame the World Baseball Classic for that, you probably have to be a little stupid. Like, you have to just be a little angry or a little overreactive. And that's something that's the nature of the beast with, you know, fandom in sports. But this tournament specifically, I think, is going to do more for baseball than anything that's been done in the last few years.
What if you're going to pick a place that you would want to go watch a game in future World Baseball Classic host sites? Where are you going? I'm
going to Japan. One of my friends was in Japan for all the group games. He's Japanese, so he was able to go out there, and he sent us videos and pictures. And I've now done like the Miami, the Latin American. I would want to do it again. Like, I definitely will be back, but I'm trying to find any way possible to get to Japan for the next World Baseball Classic and see it there, because it is different. As weird as it sounds, it doesn't make any sense, but it is a different vibe, and it looks like just an absolute blast.
The image of the World Baseball Classic that probably stood out to me the most was in Japan after Ohtani hit that home run. And there's the video of fans legit passing that baseball around one by one so everybody can see it. And then it goes back to the usher to, I assume, give back to Ohtani. I mean, if that happened in the U.S., first person that touches that ball, they're out of there and they're selling it on eBay for as much as they can get.
Dude, it's like Masataka Yoshida hit his first home run over the Green Monster. I think a little kid caught it, but like, he's not giving him the ball still, I think. I don't think he's giving him the ball yet. Like, the way like that other countries watch baseball, react to baseball, like even the World Baseball Classic, I think it's really eye-opening. And I hope that a lot of American fans like see how important it is to everyone else. Because I think we sometimes take for advantage that like we get to watch the best players in the world play in our country for our teams every single day during the year. But like a team like Cuba got to come to America, and Cubans got to see their national team play on American soil for the first time in a very long time. And it meant a lot to a lot of these people. Like, this is a huge, huge deal, and the World Baseball Classic is so awesome.
The thing I thought about during this World Baseball Classic is I didn't realize how different the environment of baseball is in these different countries opposed to the U.S. until this tournament. If for some reason the last time the WBC was played back in 2017, like, I didn't pick up on it. Like, it didn't click for me. But I'm watching this tournament. I can picture it clearly in my mind. United States is playing at Chase Field against Team Mexico, and it's a road game essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, it is probably 70-30 Mexico fans in there, and you know, like, they're rowdy, they're having a great time. I'm just seeing, I'm like, wow. I'm like, everyone here in America, most baseball fans, they probably say, whatever. Like, I'd rather go watch a movie or something like that. And it was so eye opening. It's like I feel like our priorities aren't necessarily straight, especially if we want to view this the way the World Cup is viewed. Like there needs to be steps changed here.
I think, and maybe this isn't fair, but I don't know. This would be my little call. Like, I think USA Baseball, like in general, I think just has to maybe do a little bit of a better job. I'm glad they got some big name players finally. Like Mike Trout playing is huge, so big, and I think it then attracts other players. We need to get some pitchers in there too next time. And maybe it's just like the style that we play too. Like, Americans seem to, that the guys on that team at least were like, all sort of veterans who have accomplished like great things in their career already. And it felt like this was like another thing that they wanted. Like there's no doubt in my mind, but there wasn't like that emotion that you see from these other countries where they live and die. Like, I want to win this game. When I hit a home run, I'm going crazy because I can't believe I'm doing this for my country. Where Team USA was more like pumped. I don't know. It's like you said, you don't realize it until you can compare it. And it's a hard thing to explain, but I hope for the next one, at least, Team USA and our fans step it up a little bit. Cause I'd love to have like more atmosphere for the USA games too.
You know what they need to do? There should not be a first round game on US soil. Go make USA go travel somewhere else. So they like, you want to carry, like, go care, like, go actually care, go force yourself out there.
Yeah, they'll definitely not do that, but I don't disagree.
Yeah. I will say, we're talking about the WBC here, some international travel. You want to get out to Japan eventually. Yeah, I did want to ask you about one of your videos that was involving domestic travel. I think it was one of the cooler baseball videos I've seen. Is last September, you did a video where you went to 3 baseball stadiums in 24 hours. Now, on the East Coast, maybe that seems a little more possible because there's so many stadiums close together, but that's not what you did. You went from New York to LA. You saw Albert Pujols hit his 700th home run in person. You fly back to New York, go to a Yankee game, and then take the train to go see the Orioles at Camden Yards. I mean, how much planning does that take?
A lot of planning. And I honestly probably didn't plan it as much as I needed to. There was a lot of stuff where I was like, oh man, I in that video, I mentioned how we like missed the subway and I was like genuinely concerned, like missing the train. And that was like a real thing. That wasn't even like put in there for YouTube, like dramatic purposes. We got to the train station with like a minute before it took off. And if I missed that, video's dead, video's over. And I just wasted like all this time, all this money on it. But yeah, I got the idea from a guy named Jesser. He's a big like basketball YouTuber. And I saw him do it for basketball games. I'm like, oh, I'm totally doing this for baseball. Like I wish I came up with this idea originally, but he came up with it. I did it for baseball. And I was like, all right, so I need to hire like a film guy. Like someone's got to film me because I've tried vlogging. I'm horrible at it. When I go to the games, I end up just watching and I forget to pull out my camera and record my reactions and all that stuff. And then I was like, all right, then I have to buy him plane tickets. I have to get his hotels. I have to book the travel. I have to make sure I have like a time schedule. I had to plan out shots that I wanted in the stadium, food that I wanted to eat. Like it doesn't sound like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm complaining because this is awesome. If this is my job, figuring out how to go to 3 games in 24 hours, incredibly excited. But yeah, a ton of planning went into this. And I still think I was probably underprepared.
Did you always plan on going to a West Coast stadium? Like,
yes,
because it could just be very easy to say, hey, I'm going to go Fenway, train, New York, train, DC or Baltimore, done. Boom. Easy.
100%.
Right.
I didn't want anybody to have any sort of comment to me of like, no, you went easy. Like you said, there was a weekend where the Mets and the Yankees both played in New York. I could have literally stayed in my apartment like for an entire day, not spent on anything. But I wanted to make sure that like this trip was memorable. Like when you're making the YouTube video, you need people to be like, wow, that's crazy, so that they continue to watch. So how do I do that? Go to LA, hop on the red eye, get to New York, and then we can maybe take a shorter trip down to Baltimore like that.
I mean, that video is cool in itself, but the fact you saw Albert Pujols hit 700, I mean, icing on the cake, right?
Dude, crazy. Like that date I had circled like for a month plus. I was like, this is, I think, the best time it's going to work out. The schedule works with everything, travel, flights, like all this makes sense. And then all of a sudden, Albert Pujols starts hitting more home runs. I'm like, wow, hold on a second. Like we might have the 700 home run game. I think he like cooled off a little bit, came into the game with 698 because he needed to hit 2. And like when we're filming and everything, we're recording with my friend that also came with me. We're like, oh, he's going to do it today. Like just for the purpose of the video, get people excited. He hit the first one. We looked at each other like, oh my God, like he really might mess around and hit 700 tonight. Next at bat, bang. And I was like, I saw baseball history. That's like one of the coolest moments I've ever experienced. I haven't really been at many big events. As a Mets fan, there hasn't been many, and that's most of the games I go to. So to be able to see Albert Pujols, one of the best players of all time, hit 700 home runs, it's only been done by like 4 or 5 other guys, made the video that much better. And if only Aaron Judge could have hit 62 or 61 that day, because he literally was one behind tying the record. So I was like, man, if I could see 700 and him tie the record, in the span of like 12 hours, I'm going to be on the national news. Nobody else in the world is going to be able to say I was at both of those games.
You should have just gone and bought a lottery ticket if that was the case.
Yeah. Oh, we had a part like in the video that if he did hit it, I said I was going to go buy a lottery ticket. It's just, he didn't. So I got cut out.
Man, it's 61 and 700. I mean, that would have been the baseball gods just throwing you all the luck in the world, right? Like pointing everything your direction.
He came so close too. He hit one like right to the warning track. I remember it got in the air. I'm like, no way, it's happening. And then it got caught. I'm like, they couldn't have given him one of those bouncy balls that they gave him all August and September. I would have really appreciated that for the video.
Okay, as we start to kind of wrap this up a little bit, maybe we can tie this back to our two fan bases a little bit with the Mariners and the Mets. But I mean, you do a lot of Mets videos. I mean, you do a lot of videos on baseball in general on all 30 teams. But since we're still early enough in the year here, I'll ask you, for both sides, what do you see the outlook being for both teams, the Mariners and the Mets?
Yeah, I think they're both going to be fine. I think they both make the playoffs. I think the Mariners, like the Mets, I think have a legitimate shot at being like a World Series contender. I don't think the Mariners are necessarily there right now, the way that I see this roster being. Like, I know Mariners fans love JP Crawford. I don't know where you guys stand, but I don't think you can really have a World Series team with JP Crawford at shortstop. I think they've given him enough time. He's kind of shown that he's just fine. And you know what? If you have an elite DH and an elite, like, fill the holes of left field DH, maybe it works. But to me, you need to probably find a shortstop. The problem is I don't know who that is. I don't know who they can legitimately get because the shortstop market, everybody locks up their guys long term now. So it's going to be tough. But there's definitely improvements that could be made to this team that will make them very scary. And I think like J-Rod can carry them to the postseason without a doubt. Teoscar Hernandez is starting to heat up a little bit. I don't think he's nearly as bad as his numbers have shown to start the season. And I'm a huge Eugenio Suarez fan. I like Colton Wong. Ty France, obviously, you guys know, is a stud. And Big Dumper keeps doing his Cal Raleigh stuff. So, like, the offense is good. The pitching, Luis Castillo is amazing. He's awesome. George Kirby, I'm a big fan. He pitched better today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's good. They just need that, like, one impact player, I think, away, and then all of a sudden you could start to be like, oh, Mariners can make some noise here, no doubt.
Yeah, I think that guy might just be sitting down in Anaheim right now. It's funny, Mark, you did just name the three positions you named, shortstop, left field, and DH would just so happen to be the three most contentious positions if you ask any Mariner fan.
Yeah.
I mean, it sets off some dynamite, which I just got a big chuckle out of. Yeah, I don't know where we sit on JP. He'll be a subject here eventually on this podcast a little more in depth as the season goes along. We're just waiting to see something, which might not ever happen.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the awkward scenario some teams get in is how long do we wait, right? Like how much leeway do we give this guy before we decide we need to improve? And I think when you look at teams that have been successful, one of the reasons why is there's no waiting. We're going for it now. Like we have a time period. We have this little window, and I think the Mariners' window is a little bit bigger because they have some of their younger players locked up for a decent amount of time. But you gotta jump in that window. Like the Cubs were lucky enough to get it in 2016 after they saw how well they did in 2015. But then you can see how quickly it can go away. Like who would have thought that core would have only made one World Series, right? Like you talk about Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, all those guys together, and to only win one or make it to one, like that sounded crazy if you said that back in 2016. But when you got the opportunity, you got to jump on it. I think the Mariners should do their best to jump on it. Maybe a guy like Willy Adames, but that depends how good the Brewers are too, because they're also in a weird scenario of we could go out and get somebody and be a lot better as well.
It's funny. We've talked about him. We've talked about could they go out and trade for Willy Adames. I guess the problem is they extended JP Crawford last year. Now it's not like the world's worst contract to get out of, and if they had to move him to second base, they could do it. But yeah, Adames is absolutely a guy where like the Mariners wanted to pull the trigger on that and give up some prospects for him. Sign me up.
Yeah, and the Mariners have some good prospects too, like coming up the pipeline as well. So they're definitely in a good spot. Are Mariners fans feeling down? Like I know we talked about earlier about like the overreactions, but like realistically, are you guys like has your opinion changed or wavered at all?
Not at all.
Ours
like,
not. Depends on who you ask.
Good.
Yeah. Some people on Twitter, as I'm sure you know in the Mets world, Oh, yeah, it gets real ugly real fast. So some people are already freaking out. But through 10 games, I think we're okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, the team is built to be successful, and I still think they've got like good enough guts and good enough bones to be like a playoff team. And like I said at the beginning, like you make the playoffs, you get hot, who knows? Like they have the pieces to make a run.
Both these teams, Mariners and the Mets, they're going to be a blast to watch all season going forward. They're certainly two playoff contenders in their respective leagues. And Mark, we've really enjoyed getting to sit down and kind of chop it up with you about it a little bit. We loved hearing about your channel. We love just talking baseball with people. So really, we appreciate all the time, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah, no, guys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Sorry about the about hour late start here on my side, but I'm glad we could get on here, do the podcast. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Really enjoyed that conversation with GiraffeNeckMarc. It was awesome to get a national perspective on the Mariners, talk some broader baseball topics as well. We really appreciate him taking the time. All right, TJ, let's unveil a new segment here. Let's take everybody down on the farm. So each week, we're each going to highlight one Mariners minor league player that's really been shining over that week of their games. We're going to talk about it here on the show because we think it's important to follow the minor league guys as well, because eventually they're going to play a factor into what the big league club does. So I'll kick it to you first. Through the first week of minor league games, who's been standing out to you?
Going to look right at the top, and Harry Ford, he's only played a couple of games so far, but dog, he's got an 11 OPS, so we can't complain about that. He's 4 for 9 early. He's already showing off his wheels, his athleticism. He's got a triple. He's driven in 3 runs. The most shocking thing, Lyle, I don't know if this is going to cause a demotion in his prospect status. He hasn't walked yet. I'm a little concerned.
For those who don't know, Harry Ford has an elite walk rate. I mean, last year, he put up over a 400 on base percentage. The guy gets on base. So yeah, maybe we should start sweating a little bit here that through 2 games, he hasn't recorded a base on balls. But no, in all seriousness, we think Harry Ford has a chance to have a really big year, and he's off to a hot start through just a couple of games.
Yeah, I know. I'm really looking forward to it. He's, again, not in a great hitting environment up there in Everett, which you worry about in here in High A, but I think he's good enough to continue going on there and facing higher level pitching. We do have the utmost confidence in Harry that he will continue to ascend up the prospect rankings this year. And hey, he's also great flying the Millennium Falcon and recovering ancient relics as well.
If anybody's following our Twitter account, which you should be, by the way, at Marine Layer Pod, whenever we talk about Harry Ford, we're making Han Solo references. We're making Indiana Jones references, like all the time, because it's too easy not to. And for those who don't know, his full name is Harrison. So Harrison Ford. I might have to try to get up to Everett this year at some point to catch a game just to go see him, because I would put some money, if I was a betting man, on him spending part of this year in Arkansas if everything goes right, maybe toward the tail end of the year. So while he's here in the state and just up the road in Everett, I feel like it would be cool to go see him. Maybe I can get some content out of it too for the show. So it's pretty cool to see him off to a good start. We think he's going to have a big year. All right. On my end, we're kind of hitting all the Mariners blue chip guys here in the first week, which they perform well, so they deserve it. We'll touch on other guys, not just the blue chip guys, by the way, through the year if they're playing well, but through the first week, it's the headliners. Emerson Hancock. He makes his first start of the year in Double-A Arkansas. He was dealing in that first outing. 5 innings, 3 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. Fastball was sitting in the mid-90s, which is not the 98 to 99 miles an hour he was hitting in his peak, in his prime, before he had before he had the injuries, I guess. Regardless, the fact that it's only his first start, he's healthy, and he looked this sharp, you got to be excited about it.
Yeah, and his fastball movement was really good. He got 6 of his 7 strikeouts in his outing on his fastball, and he got 12 swings and misses, which is good. I mean, this was a guy who's supposed to come out of Georgia with premier, nearly MLB-ready stuff that through injuries and deterioration has not really showed as much in the minor leagues, but is off to a really good start, and we're hoping to see Emerson have a full, healthy season. I think that's really all we can ask for. It's not for Emerson to make the big leagues this year. It's for him to pitch a full season, because I really think that's the most important thing in his development.
Bryce Miller's almost definitely ahead of Emerson on the depth chart at this point, just from the way Miller's performed, his prospect status, everything. But Emerson Hancock, when he was drafted, had the ceiling that was maybe highest of all the big three arms, between him, between George Kirby, between Logan Gilbert, which is a pretty hefty statement looking at what Gilbert and Kirby have done so far. We'll see what Emerson's ceiling now is long-term, but man, if he can stay healthy and he can have a full season in the minors where he's really, really got his A game, all of a sudden people might jump back on the Emerson Hancock train. And I wouldn't worry about his fastball too much in his first start, especially because, again, it's his first start. Like, give him time as he gets into June. There's a chance it could ramp up a few ticks. So through a start, gotta love what you see out of Emerson Hancock, and we can only hope it continues.
You only draft a guy 6th overall if he has that kind of upside. So, I don't know. I mean, remember Callis mentioned it a little bit. Even in his junior season in 2020, didn't really see that same stuff that made him so special as a sophomore, and he was, projected to almost go number 1 overall, and then fell a little bit to the Mariners in the 6th pick. So this could be like a thing that has dragged on for now a couple of years now with Emerson Hancock. But yeah, we're still we're looking for him to have a really good season, and hey, maybe you get up to 96, 97 as the summer months go along here. All right, Lyle, let's now take a look around baseball with our MLB Wraparound. All right, first up on our MLB Wraparound, Lyle, O'Neil Cruz will miss 4 months with a broken fibula. He slid into home plate this weekend and broke it while the Pirates were playing the White Sox. Just heartbreaking. I was really excited to get a full season of StatCast readings on O'Neil Cruz. The dude is the extreme everywhere he plays on the diamond, and now he's going to miss 4 months.
You hate to see it happen. And to just kind of clear the air, I'm not really putting the blame on Seby Zavala either. It wasn't a dirty play. He did block a good portion of the plate, but there was no ill intention behind it, although a fight did break out between the White Sox and the Pirates after the result. You just feel for O'Neil Cruz. The guy has such a high ceiling. He's so much fun. A 6'7" shortstop who's got big pop, a huge arm. It felt like he had a chance to break out this year, and now he's going to lose almost a full season of time.
Here are some records that O'Neil Cruz already owns. His big league career, not even 2 full seasons complete. He has the hardest hit baseball in StatCast history at 122.8 miles an hour. He has the hardest thrown assist in Pirates history at 96.5 miles an hour across the diamond at shortstop. He also, Lyle, has a sprint speed of 31 and has peaked at 31.5 feet per second, which is beyond elite. Elite is 30 feet per second. He's above that, and that's standing at 6'7", playing shortstop. He is, again, an extreme in every asset of the game, and I'm really going to miss seeing some highlights pop up of him as the season goes along.
And the Pirates have gotten off to an okay start, too. We don't really expect it to sustain, but without O'Neil Cruz, it may be tough to kind of tread water here. It's too bad. He's just so different. I mean, we talk about things we're not used to seeing in baseball these days. We talk about Shohei Ohtani all the time, and I'm not quite putting O'Neil Cruz in that category or anything, but just a shortstop that's 6'7" and can do all the things that he does and is as good of an athlete as he is. It's so much fun to watch. So you'll hope he gets back in maybe August or September and can still salvage his season a little bit. But yeah, just all around, you hate to see an injury like that. Okay, second storyline here, and it's probably the headline of baseball right now. Tampa Bay Rays, they're undefeated. They enter this week 9-0 at the time of recording. They're the first team to start 8-0 since the 2003 Royals. I mean, they are motoring right now.
Yeah, they have been really, really impressive to watch. I have trivia for you, Lyle. You ready?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Warm yourself up.
All right.
So the Tampa Bay Rays, I believe as of recording this podcast, are now 11-0 to start this season. They won their first 9 games by 4 or more runs. Can you name the team that holds the record to start a season of most games in a row winning by 4 or more runs?
Is it the 01 Mariners?
No, you're not going to guess this. I promise. I could give you 100 guesses and you'll not guess it.
All right. Final guess. The 1914 Yankees.
No. We're going to have to go back to 1884. The St. Louis Maroons of the Union Association did it 13 games in a row. So there you go.
Ridiculous. I mean, they're doing everything right now. Like, you look up and down their roster, the entire team is tearing the cover off the ball. Outside of the catcher position with Christian Betancourt and Francisco Mejia, like, every starting position player is OPSing over 800. I mean, 11 of the 14 players that have recorded a plate appearance so far have an OPS over 800. And meanwhile, you could argue that rotation, especially with the way they've come out of the gate, is the best in baseball. I mean, you look at it, McClanahan, Springs, Rasmussen, they're going to get Tyler Glasnow back. That is a deadly team.
Yeah, their top 4 starters first 2 times through, as the numbers I have. So I got it through yesterday for their 10th win in a row. You know, their top 4 starters when it had a combined 1.10 ERA, 58 strikeouts, 10 walks, and 49 innings. And then on Monday, yesterday, their bullpen combines for a 3-hit shutout. 5 different guys combined for a 3-hit shutout. I mean, the depth is showing there. It's really impressive. They have played a bit of a cupcake schedule to start. They got the Tigers, Nationals, Athletics, and now the Red Sox. 4, you could argue, last place teams, all of them. So you could put that little tiny asterisk next to it, but it is hard to win every day in Major League Baseball, and they have now done it 11 times in a row.
How long can it keep going? Are they going for 20?
Yeah, should they break the Moneyball streak right off the bat? That would be pretty funny.
I mean, they're kind of a Moneyball team themselves. I mean, a little bit less so than the A's. They extended Wander. They've extended some players, but, you know, it's not like they're breaking the bank or anything.
They're doing a lot well, and we'll see how long this ride continues for the Rays in that really loaded American League East division. Every game they win now here at the beginning could really help them out when we're battling the Yankees and the Blue Jays and the Orioles over the course of the season. Our final storyline of the week here in the MLB Wraparound. How about 20-year-old Jordan Walker, the number 1 prospect in the Cardinal system? He's off to a really white-hot start. As of yesterday, through the games yesterday, he started his Major League career on a 10-game hitting streak, joining the likes of Eddie Murphy and Ted Williams in that. He passed Ted Williams when Ted Williams in the 1939 Boston Red Sox for guys age 20 or younger hit streak to start the season. That's a pretty good list of guys. So he is 2 away from the record as of this recording.
When he reached 9 games, it was the longest streak by a player 20 years old or younger since Ted Williams. Like you just mentioned, he's in the categories of guys like Ted Williams. It's the longest streak since 1939 by a player 20 years old or younger. Guy is tearing the cover off the ball. And it's funny, he's not a great defender. He wasn't ever really projected to be. He's also playing a lot more outfield now. Originally, he was more of a corner infield prospect, but there's not exactly room at either of those positions in St. Louis, considering there's 2 guys playing those spots who may end up in the Baseball Hall of Fame one day and are still in their primes. And reigning MVP and Paul Goldschmidt, and then defensive savant, and I should really say offensive savant as well, and Nolan Arenado. So they had to move him somewhere else if they wanted to get him playing time. But the bat is doing all the talking right now, and he looks every bit the part to help a Cardinals team that is really, really lethal.
The longest streak overall, regardless of age to start a season, is David Dahl. He had a 17-game hit streak back in 2016. I just wanted to throw this at you, Lyle, because I haven't watched a whole bunch of Jordan Walker in the minors. Is it me, or does his swing not look exactly like Ian Desmond? Like, exactly like it?
I guess I hadn't thought about it. I feel like he's got way more pop than Ian Desmond, but the swing itself, maybe there's a little bit of resemblance.
The stance and the swing look very similar. After we're done recording, your homework is to go watch that. Because that's instantly what I thought of when I saw him. I'm like, wow, it looks exactly like. regardless, a 20-year-old doing this in today's MLB with all these just fireballers on the mound is mighty, mighty impressive. Much more than what I was doing when I was 20. So shout out to you, Jordan Walker.
Last thing here, this Rookie of the Year race in the National League might be as tight as it was in the AL last year. I mean, I know Julio ended up running away with it, but just in terms of the rookie talent that we're fighting for the award, 2023, it looks like the NL might have that class. You've got Jordan Walker, Corbin Carroll, James Outman, who's lighting the world on fire for the Dodgers right now, and Kodai Senga. That's a really good rookie class in the National League.
Hey, let's not discount the race in the National League last year with the two teammates, Strider and Harris. I mean, that was probably closer than the American League race, was it not?
Yeah, I guess the race was closer, but I just think of like the depth of players in the AL between Julio,
right,
Adley, Bobby Witt, Jeremy Pena. Kirby. I'm forgetting somebody too, but yeah, it was a really, really good class of rookies last year. So I think the NL's taking its turn here. Okay, wrapping up our MLB wraparound, and now moving forward to our second edition of our Russell Wilson Umpire of the Week. One more time, if you missed it last week, to qualify for this prestigious award here on the podcast, you have to do one of three things. You have to either miserably fail to see over the middle, refuse to let a play develop, or just be downright insufferable. And we have a new winner this week, TJ. You want to throw it on us here? Who's taking home the award?
Congratulations to John Libka behind the plate for yesterday, so Monday's Phillies-Marlins game, where he threw out Nick Castellanos in the 7th inning when Castellanos struck out on a pitch on the inside corner, didn't like the call, and proceeded to draw a tiny little line in the dirt, maybe suggesting where the pitch was. I couldn't tell because he barely moved his bat at all. And John Libka proceeds, by the way, in a double-digit run game, to toss Nick Castellanos out of the baseball game just because. So congratulations to you, John Libka, for taking home our second Russell Wilson Umpire of the Week.
Did Nick Castellanos even draw a line with the knob of his bat? I honestly thought he just kind of slammed the knob of his bat ever so gently into the dirt, and that was it. And then he got tossed. I mean, maybe that's what Libka thought, is that he drew a line with his bat. I thought it was less than that. Regardless, I don't say this about a lot of people just because I try to let people live their lives in general, but I'm going to say it here about umpires. They need to grow thicker skin. You're getting offended about a guy pushing the knob of his bat into the dirt? Come on. So this qualifies as what? They're downright insufferable and they didn't let a play develop? Is that what qualifies for this award this week?
Didn't let a play develop. I mean, did Castellanos even say anything? I don't think so. I was staring at the video last night trying to see if he opened his mouth. I could not see anything to say he opened his mouth. And it was quick too. It took 5 seconds for him to get thrown out.
Something like that. It's not like he walked back to the dugout. There was more chirping going back and forth, and then he got tossed. It was just a quick hook. You know why? Because John Libka, the home plate umpire, knows all these Philly fans that paid money to drive over to the game, park their car, get to the stadium, take time out of their day to go watch baseball. It wasn't to go watch a power threat like Nick Castellanos for the reigning National League champions. It was to see a guy behind home plate ringing up one of their good players. That's what they're there to see. It was to see a guy get ejected from the game.
Do you know what's the funniest part of that? That is the only missed strike call, the only strike he called outside of the strike zone the entire game. The only one.
Oh, so he actually had a good scorecard.
I wouldn't say it was good. He was 93% overall accuracy, which is fine. He did miss. He was his worst. His problem was that he was only 89% in called ball accuracy. So that's where there might be a little more beef from the opposing pitchers, but not hitters, because that's the first one that directly affected a hitter all game.
Umpires are just unbelievable. These guys really think they're a part of the show. They really do.
Right. There was someone in the stands who bought a jersey with John Libka's name on the back because that's who they wanted to see.
They never fail to amaze, don't they?
They really don't. Okay, let's close out the show with Speak Your Mind. All right, Lyle, what is on your mind today?
Okay, I have one quick one and then one longer one. I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to the Kraken because in their second season, they just clinched a postseason spot, which is awesome. I was there this past week to go see the clinch against the Coyotes, which was cool. So that makes the Seahawks, the Mariners, and the Kraken all having clinched playoff spots within the same year, which is pretty awesome. So that was my little quick one. The second one, okay, it does relate to baseball this week, sort of, but it's more on Twitter. What the fuck is going on with Evan Gattis? This guy just out of nowhere over the last couple of days, just started going on a tirade on Twitter, tweeting, responding to people. And so here were the two big things he was talking about. Number one, he's just openly talking about the cheating scandal, which everybody knows the Astros did at this point. But the fact he's going into details about things like, oh, well, we knew the trash can was getting banged more times when there were sliders or cutters coming versus, we knew exactly what CeCe was going to throw. We knew exactly what Kershaw was going to throw. Like, he is literally pinpointing the details of just how in-depth this cheating scandal got. And the one that put it over the line for me was the fact that he told some random commenter after saying, hey, Evan, I got to see you play left field in one of the 10 games you were out there in 2015. He goes, thanks. I was probably nervous and also on a performance-enhancing drug. Like, just right out to Twitter. Just telling the whole world, yeah, I was taking PEDs. Now, he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame, so he probably doesn't really care at this point. But you don't see that every day.
Do we think there's a slight chance he was just hacked?
I don't know. You would like to believe that's the case, right? But we haven't seen anything so far saying, yeah, somebody got into my Twitter account. So I'm kind of thinking that it was actually him.
And we're not going to mention what else he said on this podcast, but that probably wasn't those things that Lyle mentioned probably wasn't even the worst thing that was tweeted out by him in that tirade. Just to put that in perspective, it's just bizarre. You never see players that brutally open and honest on a social media platform, which is why it makes you think he was hacked. But we haven't seen anything.
I probably would have gone the rest of my life never thinking about Evan Gattis again until he popped up on Twitter the other day. Like, he was just one of those guys where, like, he won a World Series. He had an okay career. He had some power. But you weren't going to sit around reminiscing on his glory days as a ball player. But man, he drilled his presence right into fans' heads real quick over the last couple days.
Coming right out of the woodwork. Okay, my Speak Your Mind. It's that time of year, Lyle, where this is where I honestly, instead of this is just being me talking, this is going to be flipping it over to you and asking you, what's in Adam Silver's playbook over this next month while these playoffs or NBA playoffs start up this week? The play-in games take place this week. The NBA playoffs will take place over the next month or so. What is in Adam Silver's book? What's in there? Could you open the curtain for us? Because I know you always think ahead of these things, and you're really good at reading his mind.
There's been a couple of good ones already. I mean, you talk about the NFL script writing, and there was that whole couple week span where everybody was talking about how, the NFL has a script that players have to follow. I low-key believe, but also not believe, but yeah, kind of believe that the NBA has a script of its own too. For things, for example, that have already happened, like the Mavericks trading for a superstar in Kyrie Irving, just destroying the locker room and missing the playoffs, like we talked about in one of our recent shows. Rudy Gobert getting into a fight with a teammate, and now he's going to miss the play-in game, just so happening to play LeBron and the Lakers.
Yeah.
Coincidence? I mean...
Yeah, anyone want to check on like a Gobert bank account somewhere in Europe? An offshore bank account where there was a deposit from one A Silver? to say, hey, listen, LeBron and the Lakers are playing too good to get knocked out by the Timberwolves. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, we're gonna have
let's cook something up. And let's shout out Jaden McDaniels too. Excellent. I mean, there might have been someone who came up behind him on the bench and said, hey, listen, Jaden McDaniels, before we're going to need you to go punch concrete and break your hand and be out and be out for the play-in game. You too. We need to siphon off the Timberwolves.
He pulled a Devin Williams with that. Meanwhile, yeah, they had to enact Gobert's clause in his contract of, hey, we'll give you a $2-3 million incentive to start a fight with your teammate, get suspended, and then you'll just pick up a little extra few $1 million on the side for complying with our script. Yeah, I don't know what they've got for the rest of the playoffs here. I mean, like, what fits the narrative? They'd probably want to get LeBron another title, which in all seriousness, as 2 LeBron fans on this podcast, we would love to see, although that's not going to happen. But feel like for the NBA's sake, they love it. Meanwhile, I don't know, like maybe do we feel like there's a crash course for Sixers Celtics somewhere in this playoffs in the Eastern Conference just because those two teams don't really love each other?
I think so. I'm fascinated by the West because literally the Lakers will have to beat if they win their the Lakers would have to beat if they move on. So what? The Lakers would get the Kings in the first round, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the Lakers, if they beat Minneapolis they beat the T-Wolves in the play-in game, they would play the Kings, who have a great history in the playoffs against the Lakers. Think it back to 23 years ago. That nothing ever fishy about how many foul calls were there or free throws did the Lakers get in that game, in that Western Conference final game? I mean, people lose count. It's an enormous number. It's shaping up. You know what I'm saying? And then after that, you get either the Warriors or I think it's the Warriors or the Suns. No, I don't have the bracket up, but it just smells a little fishy that it's looking almost too easy for the Lakers to coast into the Western Conference Finals.
We'll have to see. And then who knows if they, again, like if they had to face the Suns in the Western Conference Finals or at some point in the postseason for that matter, do they play the Chris Paul storyline of he can't win a title? Do they force the Suns to lose? I don't know. That
ring cloud will hang over Chris Paul's head forever. And if they match up with the Lakers and can't beat the Lakers, there's an issue. You have KD. I mean, what are we doing here?
KD, Booker, Ayton, and Chris Paul. Yeah, that team should not be losing to the Lakers. I don't know. It's
right now, Lyle, I do believe we have a second round Celtics-Sixers matchup. The Celtics are 2 and the Sixers are 3. So that's where I think if we're actually like tangible real life storylines, not WWE behind the scenes Adam Silver script storylines, that's probably the one you look at the most.
I would agree. Yeah, it's hard to really get into the NBA regular season just because I feel like it can be predictable a lot of the time, but I'll certainly be watching this postseason and some theatrics are going to occur. So I'll be ready for it. I'm going to be ready for it. Okay. I think that just about wraps up this edition of the Marine Layer podcast. You guys know what to do by now. If you want to listen to the full podcast, you can find it on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google. Full video form of the podcast will be on YouTube and on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts at Marine Layer Pod. Meant to mention it at the start of the show, but also tomorrow night, or rather tonight, with this being Wednesday that the show is going to come out. So Wednesday night, we're going to be on YouTube with the Couch GM live on his YouTube channel doing a live Q&A. So if you guys have any Mariners questions so far through the start of the year, hop on with us and ask us some questions because we're going to be live. We've gotten to know him a little bit over the last few weeks, and we wanted to do some content together. So we'll be doing that, again, Wednesday night, 7 p.m. over on the YouTube channel of the Couch GM. So go check that out. We're looking forward to it. For TJ Mathewson, this has been Lyle Goldstein. As always, we thank you guys for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.